Next, I would like to introduce Andrew Blum, who's here at USIP. He's at home. Andrew is the Vice President for Program Management and Evaluation, and in this role, he's working to improve monitoring and evaluation at USIP and to improve the Institute's ability to learn from its programming. His overall goal is to both increase the impact of USIP's program and to clearly demonstrate that impact. Sounds familiar. Please welcome Andrew.
First, welcome to USIP. We're really excited that you decided to have your launch event here. It just makes a lot of sense, as I was talking about over coffee with someone. I mean, the linkage just makes a lot of sense. Thank you to USAID, to E3, to the Education Office for allowing me to speak to you today. We're excited you're here, but we're more excited and frankly impressed that there's such a clear goal in the USAID education strategy about conflict and crisis environments. There's a debate in our field about whether we're actually seeing more conflict now than 5 years ago or so. But I think what's clear is we're seeing more situations that have a 10, 20-year lifespan. And so I really think USAID has been ahead of the curve in understanding we need to figure out how to do normal things, send children to school in very abnormal circumstances, in circumstances like Charles described. And so it's a very sort of worthy endeavor that you're launching here today. My role at USIP is to help us learn about our programs, and most of our programs take place in conflict-affected environments, and so that learning in conflict-affected environments is what I want to talk about, use my time to talk about today, because we're really impressed as well that you've built in such a strong learning component right from the very beginning of this project. So let me put up a feedback loop. I'm a big believer in the concept of feedback loops. Feedback loops can exist on all kinds of different scales, but this is a feedback loop about on the scale of the community of practice. I'm assuming the community of practice wants to create feedback loops that look something like that. So let me just talk through this a little bit. Starting with the monitor, evaluate, assess. Lot going on there. But I want to talk particularly about data collection and data analysis. There's a real issue here because the education sector is very data rich. I think I've already heard more statistics in this room today than I might hear on a full day of talking about peace building. Conflict environments are very data poor. And there's a real challenge and an opportunity here. The challenge is how you approach data. One of the things we've learned is that how you approach data, it's almost a mindset. It's like a two kinds of people in the world type thing. I've come to think of them as bridge builders or farmers. Okay, stay with me here for a second. There's some people that approach data unless we have a complete structure, solid foundations that's totally complete, like a bridge. The structure is not only useless, but actually dangerous. In the conflict environment, we have to think about data like farmers. If you can plant 2 rows of crops, great, you have something to eat. If you can plant a little bit more, that's great, you've got a little bit more. This probably stretches the metaphor past the breaking point, but even if you plant the whole field, you have to plow it up and do it again in 6 months anyway. And so the challenge for the community of practice is to bring people into the community that are comfortable with sketchy data, with incomplete data, that are able to be creative about pulling data out of these environments in ways that may make other people uncomfortable, using that data in ways that may make other people uncomfortable. But there's a real opportunity here too, because as I said, at the education sector, you use data, it's in your DNA, and we need that in the peace building community. So an enormous service the community of practice could play is helping us learn how to do simple, rapid, but rigorous data collection in these environments. And as we heard, there's technologies coming online all the time that can help with this. But that's, I think, just a great sort of mutual benefit that the community of practice could provide. So after we monitor, evaluate, assess, we learn. We create best practices, we articulate lessons learned. Because of some of the data collection challenges I've talked about, this can be harder in conflict environments, and I want to come back to that in a sec. But first I want to talk about this gray arrow up there. I might call it the shortcut of despair. Bill Gates, in a recent Wall Street Journal article on the importance of measurement, talked about what we need to do is articulate a clear approach, set clear goals, measure, and then use those measurements to improve practice. And it's a seductive vision. But what we've learned, at least in our field, is that's not the way the world works, usually. There always has to be this phase of building a common understanding around what a result means. In the World Bank World Development Report, for instance, there's a finding that countries that build inclusive coalitions that bridge the political and social sectors are more likely to maintain stability over, a 10-year period. It's a really important finding, but it's also kind of an unsatisfactory finding just by itself. There has to be a process of coming together and saying, what does this finding mean for us, for the education sector? Including, of course, the educators in the environments where you all will be working. But without that common understanding, it's hard to know what to do with that finding. And this is where the community of practice can play such a powerful role, I think, because one, this has to be a collective endeavor. This is something we have to do together. And two, this is an ongoing process. It's not something that happens at a year-end meeting or in one report. It's a constant engagement with the evidence to pull out these lessons, to understand what they mean and how it will affect how we work. And so the fact that this community of practice exists, it's collective and it's ongoing, is a really powerful tool, I think. So moving to this box of change our organizations. And when I say this, I don't mean big restructuring or big reorganizations, but for practice to change, something in our organizations has to change. Decisions have to be made differently within our organizations. And let me give you another example based on an article I wrote for foreignpolicy.com a couple months ago. We actually have pretty strong evidence, rigorous data, that shows programs implemented in conflict and crisis environments, if they're implemented in a flexible, adaptive way, they're more effective. So that's a finding. My article, I would argue, is in this build common understanding phase, that because of this, we have to think about accountability different. Sort of to sum up very briefly, my argument is we have to hold organizations accountable not just to do what they promised, but to demonstrate how they adapted to unstable environments as well, and to demonstrate that with evidence. Now we have to change our organizations if we're going to do accountability differently. And I think that I highlight this in particular because, frankly, many of our organizations are not very well set up to deal with conflict environments, to deal with rapidly changing environments where things can look very different sort of every 6 months. And organizational change is hard work, and it can be demoralizing work. And so I sort of put out a plea here today to the community of practice to be thinking about organizational change, to at least, put part of your brain power on what might need to change within organizations in order to implement some of the lessons you're finding, some of the knowledge you're creating. So I would argue, at least in the peace-building field, at least for work in conflict and crisis environments, that the only way to really get to where we're changing practice is this long way round. That this shortcut, it hasn't worked in my experience. And so we really need to commit to doing the hard work of building that common understanding and then working on changing our organizations as well. As a final note, I just want to say we here at USIP have an enormous amount to learn as well. So I promise we will be eager consumers of what comes out of the network. And I hope as these initiatives get off the ground, you continue to see USIP as both a friend and a resource in this process. So best of luck with your work today. Again, welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Andy. It was just great to hear about the data and the difficulties of collecting and analyzing the data. We're struggling with this. We don't even know whether our indicators are really doing justice to our goal, and we keep learning. So thank you.